Welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Overanalyze Skyrim. I'm gonna be honest, these are some of my favorite videos to make, as I get to rant on all things Elder Scrolls and delve into most minuscule details possible. So if you're into that, this is the right place. And for today we have a story to tell. One that spans several millennia, reaching back to the icy legends of first Atmoran explorers. It involves secret deals with a Daedra, hideous cave-dwelling witches wielding strange mystic powers, nightmarish werewolves, and enigmatic rogue knights armed with deadly silver blades. We will meet troubled, aged heroes, explore forgotten ruins, encounter ghosts of the distant past, and retrieve legendary artifacts.
We should keep moving.
Sounds like quite a story, doesn't it? But at its core, it's a story revolving around a rivalry. And not just any, but perhaps Skyrim's strangest and most obscure rivalry. And no, it's not the one between Dragonborn and the chicken. However, a 10-hour in-depth analysis on that topic will be next. But for today, I had something else in mind. You see, Skyrim has its fair share of iconic rivalries. Empire versus Stormcloaks, Vigilance of Standar versus Daedra and all things abominable, Dawnguard versus Volkihar vampires, to name only a few. But there's one that's barely ever talked about, and most likely due to its little confusing or even odd nature, thus making it a perfect topic for a video. I am talking, of course, about the famous companions and their arch-enemies, the mysterious Silverhand. Their rivalry is portrayed through Companions' questline and therefore from their point of view. But what's curious is that it's never fully explained. The game almost intentionally provides little to no information about the Silverhand, except for a fact that they hunt werewolves. They remain anonymous to the very end, constantly lurking in the shadow and treated little more than mere thugs occupying remote ruins. Yet it's exactly this enigmatic nature that gives them a certain mystique, or dare I say charm, that captured the imagination of many players, including myself. Over the years, some have wondered about the origin and the true purpose of the Silverhand, coming up with a number of interesting theories based on scattered in-game clues. So today we're gonna have a closer look at these two opposing factions and try to understand what's exactly going on. Is there any deeper connection between them? Perhaps even a mutual history? I mean, at first their conflict makes perfect sense. Silverhand are specialized werewolf hunters, and companions are, well, spoilers alert, secretly werewolves. At least some of them are. But typically for Bethesda, underneath the surface, there are some unexplained, curious details left open for interpretation. Things might not be as simple as they seem, as is often the case. So sit back and have some mead as we journey straight into the heart of Skyrim, to the ancient city of Whiterun and proud mead hall of Jorrvaskr. And before I forget, my name is Alec, and thank you for watching. I'd like to begin, as usual, with a little digression. You see, there was a time when companions almost made me quit Skyrim. But to understand why, I'd have to briefly discuss one of Skyrim's biggest weaknesses, at least in my opinion. When it comes to the factions of Skyrim, I take Mjol's quote on the Thieves Guild.
To call it a guild is ridiculous.
And apply it on all the others. Companions, College of Winterhold, Legion, you name it. Except you, Dawnguard, you are right. But that's right, on my list of Skyrim's biggest disappointments, sitting lonely on the top of the mountain are factions themselves, and specifically their questlines. It's kinda weird because Morrowind and even Oblivion were very much faction focused, while in Skyrim they almost seem to be of secondary importance. But luckily for me, I play Skyrim for a whole another reason. Mainly for providing that freedom of exploring a vast, well-crafted world that I use as a canvas for painting my own stories at my own pace.
Walk among the stars!
Instead of relying on mostly simplistic storylines randomly thrown at me. In terms of immersion and sense of exploring a living and breathing medieval fantasy world, there is nothing like it out there, and it makes Skyrim, well, timeless. Obviously, nothing compares to that first exciting playthrough of any Elder Scrolls game. But even after more than a decade, I still get that thrill of making a new character and reliving another fresh adventure. So, speaking of first-time playthroughs, I remember being excited about meeting two particular factions, Vigilants of Standard and Companions. At the time, all I knew was that Vigilants were supposed to be a holy order of paladins, or warrior monks, and Companions were marketed as Skyrim's version of Fighters Guild.
If you ever need another blade at your side, just ask.
And that was more than enough for me. All I wanted was a strong Fighters Guild experience, a solid questline from a guild that was traditionally a home faction for my warrior-based characters in all previous games. So you can imagine my disappointment upon discovering that A. Vigilants aren't even joinable, and B. Companions questline, well, let's just say it felt short and utterly dissatisfying. I felt defeated and almost hated the game. On one hand, Vigilants were continuously mocked throughout the game, with their path of degradation culminating during Dawnguard's questline. I made a video on the Vigilance of Standard that goes into detail about this and other issues, so check it out if you haven't already. On the other hand, Companions disappointed me with, for the most part, uninteresting characters, and what really felt like an incredibly rushed, anticlimactic storyline that left a bad taste in my mouth, mostly because I expected so much from them. Perhaps too much. And that's without even mentioning my biggest problem with the Companions at that time, forced lycanthropy.
That is your choice. We will not force you. But to join the circle, your blood must be as ours.
It's not that I hated the presence of werebeasts. On the contrary, I love all the, let's call it horror elements added to the game. I just couldn't stand the fact that I had to become a werewolf to continue the questline. It bugged me from a pure role-playing point of view. Initially, it forced me to leave the guild and ignore Companions for a long time. Seasons passed, I grew older and things changed. Eventually, I returned to Jorrvaskr and decided to give Companions another chance, forcing myself to finally finish the story, even at the price of becoming a dreaded beast. And I soon realized that it wasn't all that bad. Disappointment remained, obviously, but as I played through, I encountered some fun moments, thrown in between generic raid this bandit hideout to obtain that artifact type of a quest. As always, for myself to properly enjoy any Skyrim's questline, I had to take my time, immerse myself in the surroundings, study characters, and unmask all the pieces of lore and ambiental storytelling buried underneath the raw gameplay. And that's the thing with Skyrim. It's a game that can be enjoyed in two ways, and both perfectly valid. As a mindless, fast-paced, action-oriented power fantasy without a single care for all the established history and lore, or as a game that rewards players' attention to details, reading between the lines and such. I learned very early on that for me, Skyrim works only if I take it seriously, while connecting all the loose ends and filling in all the blanks with my own conjectures. And Companions' storyline, including their implied bloody history with a silver hand, is a perfect example. I took my time investigating the history of the Companions, an adventure in itself that took me on a millennia-long ride all the way to the late Meretic era and legendary Ysgramor. These archaic tales, comprised of both fact and fiction, provided me with so much context and depth regarding the current situation of not only Companions, but Whiterun and the land of Skyrim in general. There was a moment when everything just clicked and made perfect sense. Suddenly, Companions and their struggle felt real, if that makes sense. So, I'd like to share a piece of that epic history, as I believe that providing an extra layer of depth enriches the storyline between Companions and the Silver Hand. According to Kodlak Whitemane, Companions are nearly 5,000 years old, tracing their origin back to Ysgramor, ancient Atmoran king, and his famous 500 companions. Ysgramor is in fact considered their first leader or a harbinger. In other words, history of the Companions mirrors the very history of Nords and Skyrim. And this is how important and influential Companions truly are, or at least are supposed to be. They've been here since the beginning and are literally the embodiment of that Nordic spirit of perseverance and triumph. Through the ages, to be a companion meant a highest honor and a guaranteed place among the stars in the very halls of Sovngarde.
The oldest fighting group in Skyrim, and nothing but glory from Ysgramor's day to our own. To be counted in that line is a bit of immortality. Even if I never see Sovngarde, I'll have that much.
It was one of Ysgramor's closest friends, Captain Jeek of the River, and I hope I pronounced that name right, who first broke away from this main group with his own crew, leaving the northern icy wasteland in order to explore the lands further south. And these explorers eventually reached the central tundra and discovered the mysterious Skyforge, laying in a shadow of a colossal winged statue of unknown origin, and decided to build their mid-hall, Jorvaskr, right next to it. What's interesting is that even the captured elves couldn't tell who exactly built the Skyforge, as it predates even them. But Atmorans saw that elves feared the Skyforge, which explained why were the vast fertile lands of Central Plains largely uninhabited at that time. Jeek of the River then founded the city of Whiterun, stretching around the Jorvaskr, and the rest is history. Whiterun became one of the richest and most influential Nord cities. I should also add that the current mid-hall, Jorvaskr, is supposedly made from the same ship that Jeek of the River used to sail from the northern continent of Atmora to Tamriel. Pretty cool if you ask me. Now, even though I'm not that familiar with the Atmoran lore and ancient Tamrielic history, I wanna say that these are some of my favorite tales, especially the story of discovering Skyforge and the founding of Whiterun. Both Companions and Whiterun seem to share a deep-rooted connection with the mysteries of Skyforge, a structure thought to be as old as Nirn itself and built by gods, for a reason that only they know. Skyforge could be related to Kyne, as she was traditionally associated with a hawk. I'd say it's quite possible, considering the proximity of her sacred mountain, throat of the world, as well as Eldergleam Sanctuary further east. Kyne, or Kinneret, is a goddess of winds, rain, protector of travelers and explorers, and elves, for some reason, seem to shy away from her. It was almost as if she protected this piece of land for the coming Atmorans. I really feel that these intriguing, semi-historical tales bring a certain weight to our topic, as entire Companion's storyline stands in the shadow of Ysgramor. And as we're gonna see, even the Silver Hand have some involvement. For me at least, the weight of continuous, multimillenial Tamrielic history, and even mythical prehistory, adds a whole new dimension to the reality of this world. On Tamriel, time and timelessness seem to exist simultaneously, as gods and godlike beings, as well as millennia-old spirits, still walk and talk among the mortals, actively interfering in their lives. Just in this Companion's questline, we encounter living and talking Atmoran ghosts, and interact with a soul from beyond the grave. So, in this case, history and even myths aren't just some silent, passive stories told around the campfire. They occupy their own living space, blending with a main, linear timeline. This theme is pretty much constant in the entire series. In Morrowind, we met several avatars of divine gods, a 4,000-year-old Dunmer wizard, as well as the ancient living gods, the Tribunal, capable of escaping this reality in a blink of an eye, or even capable of changing past events in some weird metaphysical time-space manipulation. Secrets of Time itself, both linear and cyclic, is one of the main themes of the Elder Scrolls series, after all. Alright, let's not get too carried away. The reason for all this metaphysical blabbering is because, as I played through Companion's questline, I felt this Atmoran proto-Nordic element attached to the very spirit of Whiterun, the surrounding tundra, never-ending wind and rain, and ultimately in the lives and struggles of Companions and Silverhands themselves. In Kodlak's ruminations and Clan Greymane's generational, almost mystical bond with the Skyforge. If you think about it, it's all really just one big, never-ending epic. On the first glance, the world of the mortals of Tamriel is very similar to our own. Men live and die as linear time flows onward towards the ever-escaping horizon. But there's also this constant presence of timelessness and certainty of afterlife that gives this world a unique mystical depth. As we're gonna see, Companion's storyline also deals with the themes of mortality, regret, soul's journey in the afterlife, and seemingly abstract philosophical concepts such as honor and valor. And finally, to put it in our perspective, a 5,000 years old faction today would go all the way back to the dawn of our own recorded history. The establishment of first Sumerian cities, Egypt's first dynasty, building of the Stonehenge, and so on. From a mortal's point of view, this is a very long stretch of time, an impossibility in our world, but not in a dream world of Elder Scrolls. So naturally, Companions went through their own periods of rise and fall, but always remaining relevant in the minds and hearts of all Nords. Formation of the Circle in the late Second Era by Kyrnil Longnose was one of the most important moments in the faction's history, ending one such dark, chaotic period. The Circle became sort of a governing body, comprised of elite companions, and again, it was named after Ysgramor's own circle of captains. However, a few hundred years prior to the events of the game, the Circle entered a new dark period. It was Harbinger Terfig who made a bargain with the terrible and powerful witches of Glen Morel. A bargain that turned him and other members of the Circle into lycanthropes. Ever since then, all members of the Circle were secretly initiated into the lycanthropy, thus serving Daedric Lord Hersin in life as well as in death. According to Kodlak, they were deceived, believing that the gift of beast blood was only temporary, and Terfig became a first Harbinger who was denied access to Sovngarde, ending up instead in the eternal hunting grounds of the Daedric prince Hersin. Moving forward to the present day, Companions are still occupying their mid-hall of Jorrvaskr, but they seem to live mostly in past glories. Companions are still widely respected, but it's obvious that faction isn't in best shape. And of course, it's on us to bring it back on the right track. Companions are introduced fairly early in game, in a scripted scene outside Whiterun, in which several of their members fight and defeat a giant. It was meant to showcase them as a band of fearless warriors, capable of taking down one of Skyrim's most dangerous creatures. But in my opinion, the whole experience is ruined by Ayla's awful, childish dialogue.
Well, that's taken care of. No thanks to you.
Due to the nature of the script, chances of giant dying before we can even approach are very high, so almost every time we are forced to listen Ayla shaming our character for not helping. We are then invited to Jorrvaskr to try our luck with Kodlak Whitemane, who can apparently see in our eyes if we are worthy of joining their ranks.
You'll have to talk to Kodlak Whitemane up in Jorrvaskr. The old man's got a good sense for people. He can look in your eyes and tell your worth.
While approaching Kodlak, we will overhear a scripted dialogue between him and Wilkus, talking about the call of the blood.
But I still hear the call of the blood.
We all do. It is our burden to bear. But we can overcome.
You have my brother and I, obviously. But I don't know if the rest will go along quite so easily.
Leave that to me.
This is the first, not so subtle reference to Companion's secret lycanthropy.
Enough!
Joining Companions seems too easy, but again, that's the case with all factions.
Here, let me have a look at you.
All we have to do is strike Wilkus a couple of times to prove our strength, and we're in. We are then allowed to use Jorrvaskr as our home, providing us with free bed and a job. Companions are led by Harbinger Kodlak Whitemane, although officially faction operates without a leader. However, there is some kind of a hierarchy, as Harbinger advises the Circle, and the Circle advises the rest of the members, often called whelps. But in their own words, every member of the Companions is on his or her own. I understand it as an expression of Nordic individualism and egalitarianism. And there's also this notion of Ysgramor being their first and only leader, almost as if spirit of Ysgramor, or his legacy, continues to lead the companions throughout the ages. But, as previously mentioned, there is a governing body called the Circle, comprised of Skjor,
Your time, it seems, has come.
Aela,
Wait, I remember you.
and brothers Vilkas and Farkas, recognizable by wearing a so-called wolf armor, except for Aela, who prefers ancient Nordic armor. And then there are the regular members, including Torvar, Njada Stonearm, Rhea, and Attis. There are also other characters occupying the mid-hall, most notably Vignar Greymane, an aging Nord and a former companion, and his brother Jorlund Greymane is faction's blacksmith in charge of forging weapons and armor for the companions. Although, according to his own words, he isn't a member.
Not actually a companion myself, but none of them know how to work a forge properly, and I'm honored to serve them.
Most of the characters act and feel one-dimensional, not surprising as they are provided with limited dialogue that's supposed to flesh out their background. We have a typical drunkard and a gambler, Torvar, a troubled Nord who's here only for the money, although he's one of the rare members with a positive attitude, but that's also mostly because he's just drunk all the time.
A man of my station has many debts. I'm not much use at labor or learning, but I can throw a punch with the best of them.
Another friendly character is Rhea,
Oh, hey there. I killed a bear yesterday. Did you kill anything?
Imperial warrior and one of the rare members who seems to be here because she genuinely cares about the old ideals of honor and glory. Njada Stonearm is far less friendlier and really hard to impress.
If the Circle vouches for you, I'm sworn to respect their judgment. But that doesn't mean I like it.
And Dunmer Attis has one of the best roasts, in my opinion.
I never thought they would actually let me join the Companions. But now it looks like they're letting anyone in these days.
Presence of Imperials or even Elven members like Attis may come off as a surprise, but Companions had an Elven Harbinger already in the late First Era. It looks like that they distanced themselves early on from the absolute hatred for all things Elven prevalent during the days of Ysgramor. It's a surprising twist, I'll have to admit, but at least it gave Companions more character, instead of being a stereotypical Skyrim belongs to the Nords type of a faction, which I expected at first. But what's important to note is that all regular members of the Companions are unaware of the fact that the members of the Circle are werewolves. Speaking of, there's a divide within the Circle regarding their view on lycanthropy. Although quite subtle, it's rarely brought up directly except briefly during the dialogue between Kodlak and Vilkas.
You have my brother and I, obviously. But I don't know if the rest will go along quite so easily.
Leave that to me.
So according to Vilkas, he and Farkas are willing to support Kodlak in finding a cure, thus ending a centuries-old curse. This difficult quest of obtaining a cure for lycanthropy is one of the faction's main narratives. And not only that, I often feel that Companions themselves are their own biggest enemy. Faction's corruption, internal conflict, and that whole deal with the Hircin, but without the existence of an external enemy. In this case, the Silver Hand, who are about to be introduced. Questline will be too passive, and this way Companions can behave as more defined protagonists. Like we said, all members of the Circle are werewolves, but Skjor and Aela are only one who fully embrace the beast blood and have no desire to be cured. I'd even go as far to say that they worship Hircin. Kodlak, on the other hand, wishes to be cured for one simple reason.
Well, I grow old. My mind turns towards the horizon, to Sovngarde. I worry that Shor won't call an animal to glory as he would a true Nord warrior. Living as beasts draws our souls closer to the Daedric Lord Hircin.
As a self-proclaimed true Nord, he yearns for an afterlife in Sovngarde, and his yearning for the cure and philosophical musings on honor and family make him, in my opinion, the most interesting character. He is an ideal companion, great warrior in his prime, no doubt, but also wise and invested in reading literature. He is also seen advising others, caring about them, and constantly reminding them about faction's founding values.
You're a strong warrior, Skjor. Your heart is fiery, and that serves you well in battle.
Thank you, Harbinger.
But even the bravest of men consider their actions. I want you to survive long enough to take the mantle.
Don't worry about me.
Yet, it feels like no one is even listening. Jorrvaskr is filled with books and rare mystical items, but I don't see any of the members even approaching a book or having an interest in anything except bashing someone's skull. And ultimately, it was Kodlak who discovered the cure, after spending years researching the matter. Companions have been plagued with lycanthropy for centuries. Plenty of time for anyone to find a solution for removing the curse. I don't believe that Kodlak was the first and only one who tried restoring the faction by breaking the deal with Hircin, but the fact is, he was the first one to find a way. It means that things we, as players, take for granted within the game aren't so simple as go to this cave and kill this target. What I'm trying to say is that game mechanics often simplify the world of Elder Scrolls to the most trivial point, when from the in-game character's point of view, reality is much more complicated. Learning a spell requires talent and effort, or learning any skill. So I'd imagine that discovering the secrets of curing lycanthropy required a rigorous academic work. These characters lack players' general insight into the lore of Elder Scrolls universe, and that's something worth remembering as well. And Kodlak is also only character to undergo any kind of development within the storyline. And by that, I don't mean anything big. Remember, it's only Skyrim. But he's the only character that made me care about not only him, but also the story. He was the only one with some kind of a path. He had expectations, expressed genuine struggle. Ultimately, he was the only one who really cared about the state of the guild. But let's talk about the other members. Wilkas and Farkas are quite simple but memorable characters. Wilkas is viewed as a more knowledgeable one, and Farkas little more than a meathead, even being ridiculed and called Ice Brain by Ayla, which again I found really annoying. Now, I said they are viewed as such, as I never really got that impression. It could be due to the lack of characterization by Bethesda, and Farkas also acts friendlier than his brooding, almost depressed brother. As for their background, they were basically raised among the companions, since losing their father in the Great War. Companions are their family, and this is also a recurring theme. Kodlak speaks of companions as his new family as well. To me, brothers represent loyalty not only to each other but to their Harbinger. Initially, their view on lycanthropy is more neutral, with Farkas even saying that he likes the feeling of strength it provides. But ultimately, they will side with Kodlak and are only members of the circle that can be cured. Ironically, all three characters who oppose lycanthropy have names referencing wolves. Farkas means wolf in Hungarian, and I believe it's pronounced Farkas. Wilkas is a typical Balto-Slavic word for a wolf, and is one of many variations like Volk, Vulk, and so on. And Kodlak's name is probably taken from Slavic Vukodlak. In my native language, it stands for werewolf. I think it's a very strong sounding creative name. Skjor is perhaps the most serious, and if you ask me, least likable member of the circle.
You still need to prove yourself, whelp.
A war veteran and later a blade for hire, he finally found his peace among the companions. He and Ayla fully embraced the so-called gift of Hircin, with Skjor being even more extreme about it, and that says a lot. He openly invites Ayla to a hunt each night, and there are even rumors floating around of them having an affair. Skjor must be in his 50s at this point, and perhaps lycanthropy grants him some additional strength or endurance, especially after being seriously wounded during the war. It's just my reasoning for his extreme positive view on lycanthropy. But what's even more important, Skjor seems to be chosen by Kodlak as the next Harbinger.
My mother was a companion, and her mother, and all the women in my family back to Harati Blackblade. I stayed with my father in the woods until I was old enough for my trial. We hunted everything there was to hunt. Good training. Ma didn't live long enough to see me join, but I fight to honor her and all my shield sisters through time.
As for Ayla, she has a fairly unusual background story. She grew up in a forest while her mother and all the women in her family fought in the companions. I can only assume that they were all members of the circle and the werewolves. On one hand, Ayla respects Kodlak and the history of the companions, but on the other, she is also very acceptable to the gifts of Hircin and sees no problem in worshipping the Daedric prince. This kinda adds some deeper layer to her character. Sadly, it's never fully explored. I'd honestly love to hear more about her family history. And who was this Hroti Blackblade? Sounds like she was a significant character.
You've been talking to those companions?
And ending our overview of the companions, I'd like to add that there are some ex-members dispersed throughout the game, like Utgerd the Unbroken, a Nord warrior living in Whiterun. Her history with the companions is rather short, as she was expelled during the training.
Too hot-headed, they cried. Weak, pathetic cowards, the lot of them.
So, what happened?
It wasn't my fault. I told them over and over that it was an accident. They wanted me to prove my worth. So they threw me up against a young whelp of a lad, hardly old enough to grow his first chin hairs. I guess they thought a woman wasn't strong enough to hurt him. I didn't mean for him to die. Why would I want that? I just lost control.
I guess Utgerd's case at least proves that companions still value self-control, or discipline. Utgerd may be an exceptionally strong fighter, but she obviously has anger issues and a short temper.
I could beat anyone in this city, barehanded.
Thus making her too dangerous for the guild. I don't even want to imagine Utgerd as a werewolf either. Alright, in the next chapter we're gonna have a closer look at the companions questline. It's fairly short anyways. And it's also time to introduce the Silver Hand, although I plan on dedicating a whole new separate chapter on them.
Last week, a scholar came to us. He said he knew where we could find another fragment of Wuthrad. He seemed a fool to me, but if he's right, the honor of the Companions demand that we seek it out.
Companions questline primarily deals with the retrieval of the fragments of Wuthrad, Ysgramor's legendary weapon. But as mentioned, there's a parallel storyline regarding Kodlak's desire to cure himself and hopefully rest the circle from lycanthropy. The overall narrative is restoring the faction, both by cleansing it from Daedric corruption and reforging the legendary battle axe. The very first mission involves finding one such fragment in Dustman's Cairn, Nordic ruin northwest of Whiterun. I'd say that this mission serves also as our true initiation into the companions. Not only we are accompanied by Farkas, serving as our shield brother, but this mission is our first true test of our fighting abilities. I don't know if I speak only for myself, but I always found this mission extremely difficult. Dungeon itself is very carefully designed, with many different interiors filled with various enemies, ranging from skeevers and giant spiders to Draugr and a whole bunch of silver hands. Yes, this is our first encounter with a mysterious, hostile faction. And the way game introduces them is very memorable. There's a moment right at the beginning of the dungeon, when we remain trapped in one of the cells and await for Farkas to set us free. However, he suddenly finds himself surrounded by an unknown enemy, and things don't look quite well for him. But then this happens.
Hey! Never should have come here.
So the big secret of the companions, kept hidden from the public for centuries.
It's a blessing given to some of us. We can be like wild beasts, fearsome.
Revealed to us already in the first moments of our first mission. Good job, Skyrim, very nice. And it's also quite deceiving. You see, Farkas, or his werewolf form, dealt with the Silver Hand fairly easily, taking them down with a single strike, thus giving us a false impression that they are just a bunch of low-level thugs. And things couldn't be more wrong, because what follows is one of the most frustrating dungeon delving experiences in the entire game, prompting me to call this sequence a green inferno. Trust me. Just seeing all those silver blades lurking between the ancient, moss-covered walls gives me nightmares to this day. They deal so much damage and it takes so much to put them down. Not to mention, Farkas will be back in his human form and won't be of much help. Even the ending boss battle with endless hordes of Draugr is a piece of cake compared to fighting our way through few silver hands. But ultimately, it's a very rough but fun experience. There's lots of room for trying out different tactics, even for someone preferring a stealthier approach. I prefer letting the Silver Hand fight with the undead first, although Draugr are no match for these knights and rogues wielding silver blades. After proving our honor, whatever that means, as all we did was killing a bunch of people for a piece of steel, we can finally be fully accepted into the ranks of companions through a ceremony held in the backyard. However, Skjor will quite enigmatically ask us to meet him tonight outside the Underforge, secret crypt underneath the Skyforge. We can also talk to Kodlak about the not so secret anymore lycanthropy and the possibility of getting cured.
I see you've been allowed to know some secrets before your appointed time. No matter. Yes, it's true. Not every companion, though. Only members of the Circle all share the blood of the beast.
So, is there a cure?
Yes, but it's no easy matter. But you don't need to share the worries of an old warrior. This day is to rejoice in your bravery.
What follows is a secret and, according to Skjor, true initiation into the companions.
Are you prepared?
Prepared for what?
Here's all you need to know. Jorvaskr is the oldest building in Whiterun. The Skyforge was here long before it was. And the Underforge taps an ancient magic that is older than men or elves. We bring you here to make you stronger, new blood. Now let's move.
Well, that's a very interesting line. I briefly talked about Skyforge and its possible connection to Kine, but truth to be told, there could be a whole separate video about it, including its link with the Underforge. This whole scene reminded me of ancient mysteries, those performed underground or in caves, and some of them even involved ritualistic lycanthropy, like the Lycaean festival held on the slopes of the Wolf Mountain in ancient Greece. But without going further off topic, I'll just say that there are theories relating Underforge with Shor, the missing or hidden god of afterlife and the consort of Kine. And perhaps this isn't so off topic after all, as Skyforge does have a mysterious role within the Companion's questline, as we're gonna see later. Within the Underforge, Ayla will show us her beast form, and Skjor will ask, or rather demand, from us to join the circle by becoming a werewolf. It seems that, at least according to Ayla and Skjor, to be regarded as a true companion, one has to share the beast blood. But if you ask me, it only proves the depth of corruption within the guild. After only a couple of centuries of Hircin's influence, and I say only because of the faction's 5 millennia history, the entire meaning of companions has changed. We do have an option to refuse, but it will lock the rest of the companions' questline. So we have to accept it.
Very well.
If I'm to justify the in-game reason for joining the circle so fast, it has to be because of our untimely knowledge of their secret. Thanks to Farkas. After the blood ritual, we black out only to find ourselves standing outside the Underforge, this time as a werewolf. I usually just stand around and wait for another blackout, in order to avoid confrontation with the people of Whiterun. And this is in fact only time we are forced to play as a werewolf. From now on, it's all on us. We can transform once a day or never again. Now, another side effect of lycanthropy is a loss of memory. After the second blackout, we will find ourselves in an unknown location, with Ayla, apparently on a mission of attacking the fort of Gallows Rock, Silverhand's hideout. Also, judging from Ayla's dialogue,
You gave us even more trouble than Farkas did at his first turn.
it looks like we did something pretty wild during our transformation, although it's never revealed what exactly, and maybe for a good reason. There's also an option to ask her about the cure, but Ayla will immediately express her, let's say, disagreement with Kodlak.
Cure? Huh. You're sounding like the old man. I shouldn't say that. I love Kodlak. I respect and follow him. But he's wrong on this. It's no curse. We're made into the greatest hunters in the land. If he's worried about some mead-swilling afterlife in Sovngarde, he's free to pursue it. I'll take the glories of the hunt right here.
Anyhow, what follows is a straightforward assault on Gallows Rock. Our goal: kill everyone on sight and locate Skjor, who went scouting ahead, alone. One definite way of recognizing a Silverhand hideout is by the presence of numerous werewolf heads impaled on sharp spikes. Silverhands are obviously efficient werewolf hunters, but they also have this barbaric, sadistic side, as there are clear signs of torture within the dungeon.
Old fort, abandoned for years. They're like jackals, making their home anywhere they can find.
I will talk more about that in the next chapter dedicated to their analysis. Dungeon is obviously filled with well-equipped Silverhands, and there are even imprisoned living werewolves and a random dead citizen on the table, apparently tortured prior to murder. Gallows Rock is also notable for hosting a single named member of the Silverhand, Notorious Krav the Skinner. Krav's gender and race are randomly chosen, which is Skyrim's typical way of generating bandits. Honestly, I'd prefer a unique, defined character instead, with some even unique dialogues thrown in, but instead we got basically a bandit chief with a name. Krav is quite dangerous though, and can reach level 28. His name reminds me of a Slavic word for blood, could have also pronounced as Krav in some countries. And appropriately, Krav the Skinner will be found in the act of skinning a werewolf, and laying nearby is Skjor's body.
I'm gonna find whoever did this.
I gotta be honest, Skjor's death never affected me in a way that maybe it should have as a fellow guild member. First of all, he has no one to blame but himself for running ahead alone into the very lair of highly dangerous werewolf hunters. So much for an experienced, mighty warrior. But also Skjor was a candidate for a next Harbinger. And this was game's rather convenient way of clearing our path towards the same goal.
The bastards! Somehow they managed to kill Skjor. He was one of the strongest we had, but numbers can overwhelm. He should not have come without a shield brother.
Ayla will obviously be much more distressed, and at this point, Questline turns into one huge bloodthirsty revenge episode. So right away, our next mission will be to clear out another Silverhand base and retrieve another piece of wood rant. Both locations are randomly generated and are nothing but a generic clear this dungeon miscellaneous tasks. So in a way, they serve as a bridge to the next main assignment. And this next assignment is one of my favorite moments in the entire questline. First, Kodlak will want to have a private talk with us, meaning it must be something important.
Yes, youngling. Have a seat.
Unsurprisingly, Kodlak will be highly critical of our recent actions against the Silverhand, which will, according to him, only cause more unnecessary bloodshed.
Your hearts are full of grief, and my own weeps at the loss of Skjor. But his death was avenged long ago. You have taken more lives than honor demanded. The cycle of retaliation may continue for some time. In any case, I have a task for you. Have you heard the story of how we came to be werewolves?
But Kodlak will then open up about the secret history of the companions, how they get in touch with the lycanthropy, and finally, how to get cured.
The companions are nearly 5,000 years old. This matter of beast blood has only troubled us for a few hundred. One of my predecessors was a good but short-sighted man. He made a bargain with the witches of Glenmoral Coven. If the companions would hunt in the name of their lord Hircine, we would be granted great power. They did not believe the change would be permanent. The witches offered payment, like anyone else. But we had been deceived. The witches didn't lie, of course, but it's more than our bodies. The disease, you see, affects not just our bodies, it seeps into the spirit. Upon death, werewolves are claimed by Hircine for his hunting grounds. For some, this is a paradise. They want nothing more than to chase prey with their master for eternity. And that is their choice. But I am still a true Nord, and I wish for Sovngarde as my spirit home.
This is the turning point in the questline. And one of the reasons why I love this particular quest is because, well, it reminded me of Morrowind. You see, the very powerful Glenmoral Coven is spread all across Tamriel, and their witches were not only found in Morrowind's DLC, Blood Moon, but were also related to getting cured from lycanthropy. And while getting cured in Morrowind required a more complicated process, involving even a human sacrifice, in Skyrim all we have to do is behead the witches and bring their heads with us. Simple as that. Witches of Glenmoral are powerful, so that will be difficult, but in this case it's going to be even harder, as these aren't ordinary witches, but hag ravens, and there are in total 5 of them. I also love that this quest takes us for a little trip to the misty and dense forests of Falkreath. They seem like a very appropriate region for this kind of adventure, very atmospheric. Finding the Glenmoral Coven also involves a bit of hiking through the wilderness, as it's very remote. Witches do require some privacy after all. There's also a drastic environmental change near the cave, as green turns to grey, no doubt due to witches' unnatural dark magic. Everything around the cave seems dried up and dead, except for nightshade, flower found commonly on graves. Needless to say, hag ravens are formidable foes.
The beasts return!
But luckily for us, we don't have to fight all of them at once, as each one has her own little chamber. One head is enough to complete the quest, but I always make sure to get all 5, as each head provides a single cure for lycanthropy. And this way we will be able to cure not only Kodlak, but ourselves and the others. What's also fun about this quest is that once we are done, guards all over Skyrim will make this comment.
Heard what you did. Killing those foul witches. Well done, companion.
I really love small details like this, as they add more relevance to these missions. And slaying the infamous witches of Glenmoral must be a big news that spread fast all throughout the province. Returning to Jorrvaskr, we discover a shocking scene.
The Silver Hand. They finally had the nerve to attack Jorrvaskr. We got most of them, but I think a few stragglers made it out.
Silver Hand attacked the companions in the bright daylight in the very heart of the city of Whiterun. Gotta be honest, this moment really surprised me. Not only because I never thought anyone would dare to directly attack famous companions, but also within the walls of Whiterun. Was Sinmir right all along?
The security in Whiterun is terrible. Shameful is what it is.
Well, maybe, but after giving this whole situation some additional thought, it doesn't seem that impossible. Silverhands could simply pose as mercenaries, looking for work, or offering help to the Jarl, granting them entrance to the city. And Jorrvaskr stands somewhat removed from the public. We never see any guards patrolling the area. In-game, it's obviously right there, but I'd imagine that in true scale, Jorrvaskr stands in an even more remote, secluded area. Completely unguarded because, well, it's the companions. They don't need guards. So Silverhands could surprise the companions and within seconds collect all the pieces of Woodrand and ran away. Who knows, maybe they even used the secret exit through the Underforge, implying they know about. Whatever the case is, surviving Silverhands escaped with all the pieces of Woodrand. And what's even more tragic, they killed Kodlak Whitemane. Extremely angered Wilkas will approach us as soon as we enter the hall.
The Silver Hand. They finally found enough courage to attack Jorrvaskr. We fought them off, but the old man, Kodlak, he's dead. We will bring the battle to their chief camp. There will be none left living to tell their stories. Only songs of Jorrvaskr will be sung. We will avenge Kodlak, and they will know terror before the end.
Their chief headquarters is Driftshade Refuge, located far north. It's a rather unassuming, snow-covered small fort, at least from the outside, making it a perfect hideout. But as usual, interior is a totally different story. There are several stairways leading further underground towards large two-leveled rooms. Driftshade Refuge, in fact, isn't your standard fort, making me wonder about its original purpose. Was it a sanctuary to some long-lost group of people, perhaps during the Great War? It had to be forgotten and abandoned for quite some time, as the interior is in awful state, even compared to other usual bandit forts. Ceilings are leaking, benches and crates just thrown all around, cobwebs covering walls. Everything just oozes chaos and barbarism, and this is one of the trademarks of the Silver Hand. I was especially impressed with this large, very tall room, buried deep underground, overgrown with ferns and moss. It just gave me some early medieval dark fantasy vibe. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but decaying architecture and abandonment of this site really left a huge impression on me. There's a prevailing sense of isolation and loneliness. Driftshade Refuge also has a very large, well-kept cellar, its own meadery, and out of nowhere, an icy tunnel, converted by the Silver Hand into a meat-preserving storage, I guess, judging by this caged dead horse. And there's another imprisoned werewolf, well fed with a bunch of goat legs. At least it feels good to know that Silver Hand took a good care of this one. All in all, Driftshade Refuge offers another unique and bleak dungeon experience, and I believe that dungeon itself speaks volumes about the Silver Hand through ambiental storytelling. Final Zone contains all the pieces of Woodrand gathered on the table, and some more Silver Hands, including a final boss, who is, sadly, yet another strong but generic bandit chief. And this is it when it comes to the in-game faction of the Silver Hands. Now all that's left is kill remaining enemy, gather fragments of Woodrand from the table, give them to the blacksmith, and attend Kodlak's funeral.
Let's get back to Jorvaskr. We'll want to pay our respects to Kodlak's spirit.
Surprisingly, or maybe not, Kodlak's body is burned over the Skyforge. We don't know if it's a special one-time only ceremony prepared just for Kodlak, or some long-lasting tradition involving all harbingers. It could be a trace of some ancient funeral rite, especially if Skyforge is indeed connected to Kine, as previously discussed. After all, there's an ancient Nord belief of Kine leading souls to Sovngarde, so I guess it would be appropriate to burn the body of a Nord hero on her pyre. And to make things even more mysterious, after the funeral, Jorlund will have this rather interesting comment.
You know, since Kodlak's funeral, the Skyforge feels more awake. It's always been said that the souls of the heroes of old are what gives Skyforge steel its strength. But I think the Forge knows the greatness of Kodlak's soul. I can't really explain, but it feels like it's young.
In my opinion, this only confirms the mystical nature of Skyforge. I also believe that this mystery has been forgotten over the centuries, as companions themselves strayed from their path of honor into several periods of decline and chaos. And Hircin's recent corruption didn't help either. But Kodlak's spirit, even though he remained a werewolf, somehow managed to activate the ancient mystical potential within the Skyforge. Perhaps it recognized Kodlak's noble cause. Jorlund Greymane, being in charge over the Skyforge his whole life, felt that change, and he is in fact now able to forge a special type of a Nord hero weapon. Immediately after the funeral, remaining members of the Circle will gather in the Underforge, discussing Kodlak's wish to be cured of lycanthropy.
Being Moonborn is not so much of a curse as you might think, Vilkas.
That's fine for you, but he wanted to be clean. He wanted to meet Ysgramor and know the glories of Sovngarde, but all that was taken from him.
And you avenged him?
Kodlak did not care for vengeance.
No, Farkas, he didn't. And that's not what this is about. We should be honoring Kodlak, no matter our own thoughts on the blood.
You're right. It's what he wanted, and he deserved to have it.
Kodlak used to speak of a way to cleanse his soul, even in death. You know the legends of the tomb of Ysgramor.
There, the souls of the Harbingers will heed the call of Northern Steel. We can't even enter the tomb without Wuuthrad, and it's in pieces like it has been for 1,000 years.
And dragons were just stories, and elves once ruled Skyrim. Just because something is, doesn't mean it must be. The blade is a weapon, a tool. Tools are meant to be broken and repaired.
Is that... Did you repair the blade?
This is the first time I've had all the pieces, thanks to our shield brother here. The flames of Hero can reforge the shattered. The flames of Kodlak shall fuel the rebirth of Wuthran, and now it will take you to meet him once more. As the one who bore the fragments, I think you should be the one to carry Wuthran into battle. The rest of you, prepare to journey to the tomb of Ysgramor, for Kodlak.
It turns out that one can be cured even in afterlife. However, we would need an access into the tomb of Ysgramor, which is sealed due to the missing weapon, Wuthran. And luckily for us, Jorlund managed to forge it back using all the pieces that we brought to him. And I like how for a moment he almost took the charge over the companions. You can tell that this was his moment to shine. Jorlund is otherwise a man of very few words, but suddenly he entered the Underforge and basically ordered around everyone. It also made me wonder if he's aware of Companion's secret. And the final quest takes us straight to the tomb of Ysgramor, far north, in the sublime Arctic landscape. It plays out fast as tomb is rather small and linear. Vilkas will warn us of dangers ahead, while deciding to remain at the entrance by the statue of Ysgramor.
Kodlak was right. I let vengeance rule my heart. I regret nothing of what we did at Driftshade. But I can't go any further with my mind fogged or my heart grieved.
Honestly, I feel kinda conflicted. On one hand, Vilkas does have a moody, troubled, sort of a depressed character. I already mentioned that before. But refusing a chance of fighting ghosts of Ysgramor's companions and meeting Kodlak for one last time, and a chance of becoming next Harbinger, maybe deep down Vilkas knew that he wasn't meant to be a Harbinger, therefore deciding to remain at the entrance. Anyhow, upon placing Wuthran back into Ysgramor's hands, his tomb will open up and we can finally move on, followed by Ayla and Farkas. Except that Farkas too will decide to give up.
I can't go any further, Shield Brother. Ever since Dustman's cairn, the big crawly ones have been too much for me. Everyone has his weakness, and this one is mine. I'm not proud, but I will stay back with Vilkas. Give my regards to Ysgramor.
And in his case, because of spiders. Remember that very first mission in Dustman's cairn? There was an encounter with a large frost spider, and apparently it left him scarred for life. I think it also continues the theme of brothers' loyalty, staying together no matter what, as he specifically mentions staying with Vilkas, and that could be his true reason. Or who knows, maybe he really just doesn't like big crawlies. Rest of the dungeon consists of fighting overgrown spiders and a number of companion ghosts, rather eager to test our honor. Ayla, as always, will remain in the back, far in the back, with her precious bow and arrow, so most of the fighting is on us. And finally, in the last chamber, we will encounter a familiar figure, Spirit of Kodlak, warming hands by a strange ethereal fire. Apparently, he is surrounded by a number of previous Harbingers. Although we are unable to see them, they can, however, see us, as we brought honor back to companions. There's an interesting line about him evading Hircin, which means that Kodlak is in some kind of a in-between state. I'm not really sure about that one.
You still have the witches' heads. Excellent. Throw one of them into the fire. It will release their magic. For me, at least.
He will then ask us if we still have witches' heads, which just reminded me that all this time I had these 5 disgusting heads on me. Yikes. Casting one into the blue flame will release Kodlak's wolf spirit. Defeating it will cure Kodlak's lycanthropy, thus allowing him to finally enter Mists of Sovngarde.
And so slain the beast inside of me. I thank you for this gift. The other Harbingers remain trapped by Hircin. Perhaps from Sovngarde, the heroes of old can join me in their rescue. The harrowing of the hunting grounds. It would be a battle of such triumph. And perhaps someday you'll join us in that battle. But for today, return to Jorvaskr, triumph in your victory, and lead the companions to further glory.
I honestly love how, for a second, we can almost see real physical Kodlak for one last time before disappearing forever. Also, his departing speech about Sovngarde invading Hircin's hunting grounds to release the spirits of other trapped companions is very interesting just from pure lore perspective, as it implies so many new things and opens even more questions regarding the afterlife. But what matters to us is that the questline is completed, and we are named the new leader of the companions.
Did I hear right? Did he say you were to lead the companions? You've earned the right. Your strength and honor are apparent to all. And it's my honor to be first to address you as Harbinger. Let's go tell the others.
Ayla will immediately recognize us as the new Harbinger, as well as Vilkas and Farkas, who are still back at the entrance, admiring Ysgramor. And thus ends the saga of the companions. Kinda. We can still offer to cure Vilkas and Farkas, with Ayla being only one to remain loyal to Hircin. There are also other Hircin-related quests with her if we remain a werewolf. However, for all things and purposes, companions are restored and back on the right track. Now, for the final part, I'd like to discuss the Silver Hand more closely and offer some of the interpretations regarding their possible connection with the companions. As we have seen, game represents the Silver Hand as a group of werewolf hunters, highly antagonistic towards the companions. Gameplay-wise, they are simply bandits armed with silver blades. And few members of the companions will also offer short and not very complimentary opinions on them.
Bad people who don't like werewolves. So they don't like us either.
They're like jackals, making their home anywhere they can find.
However, we have to remember that in-game opposing sides often describe their enemy in the worst possible way. For Imperials, Stormcloaks are dirty, illiterate rebels, while Stormcloaks see themselves as true sons and daughters of Skyrim. It's all in the perspective, and every time we meet or hear about the Silver Hands, it's from the companion's perspective. With that said, Silver Hands obviously have an element of chaos within. All of their headquarters are some of the most remote, ruined structures found in Skyrim. And I bet it's on purpose. There's a clear distinction between their brutal, nomadic tribalism and factions like Companions or Dawnguard, who prefer open display of their identity and power, whether with their choice of armor or a fancy headquarter. The Silver Hand look and act like bandits, or simple mercenaries, and maybe it helps them move across the province undetected. In that regard, when Ayla calls them jackals, she couldn't be more right, but for a whole another reason. One of the most common criticisms or confusions about the Silver Hand is their practice of banditry. They will attack the player even without joining the companions. Most simple explanation is, of course, game's poor scripting. But what if the Silver Hands depend on it for survival? Just like any other bandit group, we already established that they inhabit forgotten ruins, far from cities. Therefore, they aren't really law-abiding citizens, nor do they pretend to be. But question remains, why would a group dedicated to such a noble cause act like that? Well, for once, just because someone is a monster hunter, it doesn't mean that they are lawful or even good for that matter. In some strange, ironic way, by hunting the hunters, werewolves, Silver Hand most likely unwillingly participates in Hircin's grand scheme or sphere of influence. Hircin is all about the wild hunt. Even in his eternal hunting grounds, no one is actually safe, as even the hunters become hunted by other beasts. It's an endless game of chase and survival. So here we have a similar situation that werewolves, regarded as ultimate predators, also become the prey. So could it be that the Silver Hand have some kind of a connection to Hircin? Probably not, at least not directly. But it's just an interesting perspective. As for their practice of torturing werewolves, apparently evident throughout their dungeons, and even murdering innocent citizens, like this woman on a table, well, what if they instead study werewolf anatomy, including this seemingly innocent woman who was perhaps a lycanthrope. You see, members of the Silver Hand will often carry a book, but not just any. Their preferred literature is either on the legends of Ysgramor, described within the tomes of the Songs of the Return, or about the werewolves, and there are specifically 2 books on that subject. Lycanthropic Legends of Skyrim, which, by the way, has a really funny little reference to companions, and Physicalities of Werewolves, a book that goes into strange details regarding the anatomy of werewolves. Believe it or not, bizarre anatomical studies are part of Tamrielic lore. And I just want to read the introduction, as I believe that it may offer a glimpse into the mindset or psychology of Silver Hand. So listen to this. Far too many books such as this one begin with some sort of justification. Some reason for study is concocted, in the hopes that the writer's obsession will be seen in a more noble light. I make no such pretensions. No werewolf killed my family. None ever threatened me personally, nor even an acquaintance of mine. My obsession is born out of simple curiosity, with a strong dose of hatred for the unnatural. Is it possible to hate something without having been done harm by it? I am no philosopher, and thus here ends my introduction. I have endeavored, over the course of several decades, to perform a complete study of the physical nature of the creatures we call werewolves. I overlook entirely the origins of this plague, whether it is acquired voluntarily or inflicted, and how one might be cured. Such matters are filled with too much guesswork and rambling second-hand inanities from farmhands. So there you have it. Most popular Silver Hand theory is that they themselves are an offshoot of the companions. And to my knowledge, this theory is supported by 3 main clues. 1. Silver Hand's peculiar interest in wood-rant. 2. Them often carrying around the Songs of the Return. And 3. Their knowledge of companions' otherwise well-kept secret of lycanthropy. So let's quickly glance over these 3 points. The Silver Hand's peculiar interest in wood-rant. Remember Dustman's cairn again? Upon arriving, we already encountered the Silver Hand inside. They were there before us, meaning they didn't simply follow us, but instead went there with a single intent of obtaining the fragment of wood-rant, which also raises another minor question. How did they know it was there? Because companions learned it directly from a scholar who discovered the location. Does it mean that Silver Hand has a secret spy network? wood-rant obviously has a very significant role in Companion's storyline. It's a legendary weapon of their founder, and it's even shown on their banner. But why would a group of random werewolf hunters be so eager to retrieve it as well? It's a waste of time, supplies, and men. I don't believe that they will go through all that trouble just to spite the Companions. Unless Silver Hand's founders belong to the Companions prior to the corruption. And that leads us to the second point, Songs of the Return. These books again describe legends of Ysgramor and his companions, and are obviously very important to Companions' lore. Yet they are often found on members of the Silver Hand. Why having such a focused interest in the Companions' lore and artifacts if you're a simple werewolf hunter? So, from how I understand this theory, during the corruption of the Companions by the hands of Harbinger Terrific few hundred years ago, some members of the circle refused to participate in the blood ritual and were forced to leave, prompting them to found their own faction, this time focused on exterminating werewolves. For a pretty good reason, I'd say. Obviously, this newly founded group would dedicate their lives to hunting not only members of the Companions, who were werewolves, but the werewolves in general. As years, decades, and centuries passed, Silver Hand slowly degraded into a band of ruffians, accepting the life outside the walls of civilization. You see, no matter how noble your goals are, going against the Companions means almost a certain stigma in the North society. Companions are so highly respected that it would be nearly impossible to expose their dark secrets. So, by going openly against the Companions, Silver Hand doomed itself to a life outside the society. Thus, their gradual degeneration into a bandit-like tribalism and reliance on banditry. And then there is also a fact that they are aware of Companion's secret. In the very first scene, When a group of silver hands surrounds Farkas, one of them will say the following.
Your mistake, companion.
Which one is that?
It doesn't matter. He wears that armor, he dies.
He wears that armor, he dies. Well, wolf armor is widely recognized and associated with the companions, more specifically with the members of the circle. And it's clear that silver hands know that whoever is a member of the circle is a werewolf. But again, how? Not even regular members of the companions, nor citizens of Whiterun, including guards, know their secret, which is why theory of their shared history prior to the corruption makes so much sense. I just think that it's difficult for people to associate current Silverhand, one found in the game, with the companions. But as I said already, it's been at least 2 centuries of them living in Skyrim's dark underworld, world of crime, violence and barbarism. Original Silverhands could be much more, let's say, ethical and noble. Similarly to historical Dawnguard, originally a formal guard working for the Jarl of Riften, eventually becoming a company of extremist vampire hunters who won't shy away from methods of torture. But all of that aside, for me the worst part is that Silverhand is yet another wasted opportunity, alongside Vigilance of Standar, and Skyrim would certainly benefit from having a fully playable werewolf hunting faction with a more fleshed out lore. Problem is, of course, how to balance things out and not portray companions as villains. I feel like that was one of the major issues and reasons for why this entire questline felt rushed. Skyrim rarely offers such freedom. Destroying Dark Brotherhood comes to mind, having this large-scale influence within the game world, such as choosing whether to save or destroy a whole faction. Companions are obviously somewhat special since their entire history and existence is tied to the very Nordic society and their ideals of honor and glory. Thus, destroying companions entirely may be problematic, but cleansing it from lycanthropy could be achievable, even through an outside force. Silverhands could simply spread the word around, reveal companions' secret, bring it to the public and even Jarls, because werewolves are universally feared and hated, and Silverhand with some grooming and better PR could become a legit badass faction, loved by common folk, even praised as local heroes. There are many different paths, instead of acting like a typical one-dimensional sadistic villain. I'd even imagine their theoretical questline involving forging silver-based weapons. In fact, silver weapons are quite rare in Skyrim and to my knowledge, exclusively reserved to Silverhands. So where does all this rare weaponry come from? Do they have a special deal with the silver mines of Markarth? And finally, even lore about the werewolves could use some meat. Compared to vampires, werewolves are much less researched. And Silverhand's questline could also solve this problem.
I'm telling you, I heard it. Howling. Those werewolf tales are true.
Let's capture a living beast, study its behavior, anatomy. Well, I'm just getting carried away now, but seriously, werewolves are surprisingly rare in Skyrim. I'm not even sure if there was a random wild encounter, at least prior to Dawnguard. There were only unique characters like companions or Sinding. Well, it is what it is. Companions and Silverhand remain one of the most bizarre and enigmatic Elder Scrolls rivalries. And I'm not gonna lie, there's a charm to its obscurity. Otherwise, I wouldn't make an hour-long rant about it. But while working on this video, my mind kept wandering back to Morrowind. And I think it's because Morrowind, in so many ways, ruined Skyrim's experience for me, at least in the beginning. Morrowind's factions felt so important, interconnected and complex, and its version of lycanthropy felt like a true curse. Once afflicted, you had to transform every night, whether you like it or not. And in order to sustain health, you had to feed on NPCs. So I was really anxious of becoming a werewolf in Skyrim, expecting same challenges and difficulties. It was only much later when I realized that each werewolf transformation is by choice. I guess there are different variations of lycanthropy, similar to vampirism. In any case, this was my take on companions and the Silverhand. If I had to choose my favorite, It's kinda hard, as I love obscure monster hunting underdogs like Silverhand, although I prefer less sadism and more character and nobility. They don't have to be these stereotypical lawful good paladins, but also don't make them indistinguishable from mere bandits. On the other hand, companions, and this is now going to sound very harsh, always rubbed me the wrong way. Could be the overall pretentiousness or even arrogance found within their precious mead hall. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate the companions, I just really don't care much about them. Fighters Guild in previous games was at least straightforward and honest about their work. They were plain mercenaries, whether corrupt or not, working only for gold. And all that talk among the companions about honor and glory and calling upon Ysgramor felt at times so fake, especially coming from the mouths of confused, arrogant characters who in reality cared only about the gold and their own pride. You know, the more I think about it, it could be that Kodlak Whitemane was indeed the last true companion, thus the reason why Skyforge decided to celebrate his spirit, and retrieving the axe of Woodrand at the same time, after who knows how long. It all feels like a nice closure to a millennia-long story. Maybe the circle is complete.
Kodlak Whitemane is in a better place now. For is there any place better than Sovngarde?
Alright, if you reached this far, my sincere apologies for taking so long. I still hope that you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay safe and watch out for those pesky werewolves. Now, where's that chicken?
Time to end this little game. Gonna rip you open!
You won't get the best of me!